And welcome back to the Touchline Talk Show. It is time to discuss the NWSL final, MLS Conference Finals, the big domestic games, the only top tier domestic games this weekend, starting with the MLS Conference Finals. Then I will get to the NWSL Championship. We're going to go in chronological order, just like last week. So that means up first is your Western Conference Final, Austin FC at LAFC. Austin won both matchups in the regular season, a 2-1 win in LA on May 18th, a 4-1 win on August 26th in Austin. If you remember, that was kind of the game where the small skid for LAFC turned into a legitimate concern of, is this thing slipping away? Are they going to blow the supporters shield? Do we have a supporters shield race all of a sudden that nobody thought was going to be there? Because Austin were that dominant in that game. This scares me if I'm an Austin FC supporter heading into this game. I am a subscriber to the idea of how difficult it is to beat teams 3 and 4 times, particularly when you're not the better team. Usually this conversation is, right, it's when the Union played the New England Revolution, 5 or 6 times in that bizarre 2020 season because of the schedule, and then they had to play them again in the playoffs. It's usually, LAFC's beat Austin twice, can they do it again? This is the underdog, the team on the road, having 2 wins already, so you're trying to beat LAFC 3 times. That in and of itself scares me. Yes, I do think there's something to the idea of having confidence if you're Austin that you know you can do this because you've done it before. And certainly they can go into Bank of California Stadium and outplay LAFC. It's not out of the realm of possibility. It's also worth pointing out Austin did not trail in either of these 2 meetings. I talked about this after they got that win over Dallas, and I will mention it again here. I don't like Austin as a team playing from behind. I'm not worried about LAFC if they go down an early goal. So much of what Austin does is predicated on being able to control a game, to not have to force anything, to kind of play the way they want to. They just don't have a lot of solutions. And I know they scored the goals against RSL, but it wasn't pretty. There was never a sense of inevitability. They dominated all the stats stuff, but they didn't create loads of good chances. That is part of the key to why they've been able to win these first 2 meetings is they got that first goal and they continue to build on it. If they get the first goal again in this one, now you're in business because they have shown they know how to exploit LAFC when LAFC are chasing a game. That is the big positive for me coming out of the regular season in these 2 meetings if you're Austin. But you got to get that goal again to be able to make the game play out the same way. Otherwise, I have a hard time seeing Austin coming from behind and winning this game. In terms of things I'm looking at, first, sort of building off of that, who has control of this game? Both of these teams want to be sort of on the front foot, want the ball. And then the second part of that is, okay, so only one of them can. Can the other team adjust? And this is what was so, I've gotten to talk about LAFC and El Tráfico. This is what was so impressive to me about that game. There were plenty of things that went wrong for LAFC. They never really felt like they were dominating proceedings. But every time they needed a goal, they found one. They did that sort of against what you expect from them. And if you go look at the possession numbers, it is jarring. They have dropped dramatically since Bob Bradley. And I went back and compared them to the other Supporters Shield winning team. It's not the same thing. They have evolved, and what Steve Schwindel has added is the ability to play in transition more, the ability to not need the ball and to not have to sort of break teams down by passing left and right. They are a more multidimensional team. I believed that was the case heading into the postseason, and I needed to see it. You saw it in El Trafico, which goes back to what I said earlier about I'm not scared if they go down a goal. They can adjust, and they can also just dominate the ball for 20 minutes and bombard your goal. They can do a little bit of everything. They look like they have plan A, plan B, and that's huge in the postseason. It's one of my sort of pillars of postseason success, if you will. I'm not sure Austin has that, which is why I feel good about LAFC in this game. Second, do Austin's secondary attackers deliver? You know you're getting Sebastian Giroussi. He's one of the best players in the league. Fantastic season. Big time goal scorer, big time creator. He gives you an opportunity in this game. He can be the best player on the field, 100%. LAFC have, 1, 2, 3 at least of those guys. This can't be Giroussi versus LAFC's front three. You need Maxi Arruti. You need your winger, specifically Diego Fagundes, who had such a good season. Whoever's going to end up in forming that attacking line, they need to be really good. And you need a secondary creator, and that has been Diego Fagundes for this team. He can't be quiet. You can't have both wingers be quiet. You need somebody to help Giroussi. Because I don't see this being a game where it's a 1-0 win because one chance decides it. I'm seeing more like a 2-1, 3-2 kind of thing. 3-1 maybe. If Giroussi doesn't, if people are missing chances, if Diego Fagundes is kind of taken out of the game, this could get lopsided because it's so difficult to do that at LAFC because they've got 3 or 4 guys who can control a game. Austin, as good as this attack has been, don't exactly have that kind of ability. The other thing I'm going to throw out here, though, last 9 games, LAFC, 1.8 goals allowed per game. They have not been spectacular defensively. This is another one of my postseason things. You got to be able to win the 1-0. Again, I'm not convinced it's going to be this game. I think it's more likely it comes in a final. But they can be got at defensively. And, and the Galaxy showed you can find a way to get goals kind of out of nothing when you're trailing. It's not like the game is over. That contradicts what I said about Austin and my hesitations with their ability to do that. But it's not like you're facing a juggernaut defensively. You've scored on this team. Other teams have scored on this team. So this should be a phenomenal matchup, but those are the things I am looking at. Who's got control, and can the other team make an impact even if they don't have exactly what they want in terms of possession and sort of the game going the way they want? Austin secondary attackers, do they show up and do they make a difference? And can you exploit this vulnerable LAFC defense? On to semifinal number 2 in the East. Union won both meetings with NYCFC this season, a 2-0 win in New York on March 19th, a 2-1 win in Philadelphia on June 26th. You can kind of throw those out the window because both teams are very different. What I want to talk more about is last year's conference final. And I want to qualify this first by reminding everybody this was the game where the Union lost, I think it was something like 11 players to COVID. Something like half of those were starters. It was a shell of the Union team that had gotten them to hosting an Eastern Conference final. And NYCFC had a couple injuries, and Tati Castellanos was suspended for this game. So, in one sense, there's very little to take from it because so many of the key players in this game were not in that one. But there is one point I want to make from that game. First half, NYCFC could not connect passes. It was one of the worst NYCFC performances I've ever seen. They had nothing happening offensively. The Union were just running around, causing chaos, deflecting passes. It's not like the Union were doing anything offensively, but they were really bothering NYCFC. They could not match the intensity of that Union pressure and just the way the Union attack you in that midfield. Right? It is all built on chaos, direct, second balls, making your life uncomfortable, and the Union were absolutely able to do that. After halftime, NYCFC regrouped. They were much better. They scored the goals they needed to and were certainly the better team, in large part because the Union didn't have anything close to their first team lineup out there. So that is the one thing I want to mention from NYCFC's perspective. Your team isn't going to look all that different from the one that showed up for this game last season. There are some notable changes, but the biggest one is Castellanos, and Castellanos wasn't there for this game last season, the Eastern Conference Final, either. You got to show up, especially against this Union team, which is so much better than the one you faced in the Eastern Conference Final last season. You got to show up the entire game. You are not going to get away with playing the first half you did last time. It's not going to happen. In terms of questions, first, it's all sort of going into how do NYCFC line up defensively? What is Maxime Chanot's status? If Maxime Chanot cannot play, does Nick Cushing stick with the back three? The answer when Chanot went off against Montreal was to go to a back four. That did not really work. It went back to a back three. It got better. Does Nick Cushing start with that regardless of who is available? Does he just say we're playing three center backs? And in this game in particular, this is really important from a tactical standpoint because NYCFC are one of those teams. The outside backs, particularly Anton Tinnerholm, much more effective, built to play as wingbacks. Wingbacks and fullbacks, if you're saying right, left, right back and left back, not the same thing. I don't think this gets talked about enough. Very different positions. Now, yes, the same guys can typically play them, but Marcos Alonso is not the same kind of left back he is left wing back. He needs that defensive cover. He needs to be able to get farther up the field and play more of as a winger and a left midfielder who then has those additional defensive responsibilities, rather than being part of a back line. That is the difference. And it's not that Anton Tinnerholm can't defend. It's that you want him getting up the field. You want him pinning the Union in as part of your possession. That's what he's so good at. That's why he's on the field. It's much more difficult to do that when you go to a back four. And you saw it against Montreal. Montreal were just throwing wave after wave of attacks at NYCFC. They didn't do all that much with them. But you barely heard those outside backs for NYCFC get mentioned in that game. Part of the formula for them winning this one is you've got to get them much more involved. And I'm hesitant to believe they can do that in a back four. I think their chances are much better if it's a back five. It's why they have used the back five. And maybe Chanot is healthy and it's not a major concern. That is something I'm really looking at, though, is what is the formation NYCFC and Nick Cushing choose to use. Second, transition. The Union live off of it. It is what they do. They are super direct. They want to turn you over. They want to win second balls in midfield. They want to just boot the ball up the field and try and win, knockdowns. They are all about going from point A to point B faster than you. And they have the strikers to do it. They are all strong and they are all super quick. NYCFC, not that kind of team. However, they were really, really good in transition against Montreal. That game did not go the way they wanted it to, but every time they had an opportunity, when they were able to absorb that pressure and kind of release from it and get on the counter, they were scoring goals. So this is kind of a different question for both teams, but it goes to the same point. Can the Union do what they want to do and play the way they want to play? Or are they going to get really frustrated and NYCFC are able to stop them from having those moments, preventing the turnovers and pinning them in more so that they've got to do more defending. They can't do what they are best at. And on the NYCFC side, if this game isn't going the way you want, which is entirely possible considering it's going to be in Chester and this Union team is terrific, can you create and take your opportunities on the counter? Can you be as good in transition as you were in Montreal? Because it might take that to stay in this game or to get a first goal and change the complexion of this game. I'm not the biggest fan of the Union down a goal. I have more confidence in them than Austin, but they're, again, a team that's built to play from ahead. I expect them to come out with a fury, knowing how close they came last season and what COVID did to their chances. If NYCFC can get that first goal, it very well may come on the counter, and that could change everything. So that's number 2. Number 3, the midfield. First, does Alejandro Bedoya play? If so, what role? What role does Keaton Parks play? You've got some of the injuries, guys coming back from injuries as part of this. On a more basic level, though, which midfield is better? Jose Martinez, Leon Flock, superb against Cincinnati. Jose Martinez, that might have been the best distribution I've ever seen from him. He is not a guy that is known for his passing ability. He is there to stop Maxi Morales and stop Luciano Acosta and, be one of the closest things you've seen in MLS to N'Golo Kante. But he was terrific with his passing in that game. And of course, Leon Flock gets the goal. He's another one of those guys that does the dirty work. Not great going forward, but he finds a way to score a good goal. You need more from your other midfielder, whether that's Alejandro Bedoya or Jack McGlynn. You need more from Daniel Gazdag at the top of that diamond. On NYCFC side, midfield's been, again, sensational. Maxi Morales is scoring goals. You've got guys helping, contributing. Pereira's been fantastic. You can go down the list. They got to keep that up. I think, and this is true in every game. Whoever wins the midfield battle, odds are they're going to win the game. But I do think it's especially true in this one because that midfield is so important to the way the Union play. If you can bother them there, stop them from getting the ball up to those forwards, you can keep them quiet. And that's what Cincinnati were able to do. The question then becomes, can you sort of find a way to get around that? And that's what the Union were able to do against Cincinnati with that Leon Flock goal and with Jose Martinez being so good with the ball at his feet. It's not what you're trying to do, but they were able to pull it off. If it comes to it, can they pull it off again? So that is what I'm looking for in the Eastern Conference Final. And now to NWSL Audi Field, Kansas City Current, Portland Thorns for the championship. Again, not sure you're going to put too much stock in these teams' meetings this season, but Portland, 3-0 win at home on April 30th, a 1-1 draw in Kansas City on September 18th. My questions here. First, can Portland get their attack going? It was so good all season long, and it just kind of wasn't really there against San Diego. Now, I know they scored goals. They scored 2 phenomenal goals. That is not a sustainable formula for success. That is a way to escape a playoff game and continue your season. If they get goals like that again, hats off to them. You're just not beating them. They're the team of destiny. Sophia Smith, really quiet game. Got to get her more involved. Got to get Morgan Weaver more involved. This team is built around its attack. Its attack needs to be better. You can't be asking Rocky Rodriguez and Crystal Dunn to bail you out with volleys from, 20 yards out or whatever it was. Second, who makes a mistake, if anybody? And I mention this specifically because Kansas City has been so ruthless capitalizing on the ones their opponents make. When you look at the goals they've scored this postseason, it hasn't been, the prettiest build-up in the world. It's been a lot of picking up a loose ball, forcing a turnover, and being able to then create a good opportunity out of that. If Portland can play a clean game and doesn't give Kansas City anything to work with, the Thorns are massive favorites. The players on this Kansas City team that were supposed to be the ones to sort of unlock teams, make that difference, give them that moment of brilliance, are unfortunately not available. So they've been doing a terrific job finding ways to continue to score goals, sort of working together as a team, doing all of those collective little things. A lot of that comes from the pressure they put on teams and teams not being able to deal with it. Can that continue? Can they get another goal off of some kind of miscue, some kind of error, some kind of, bad pass, bad touch that turns into this transition opportunity for Kansas City? And then third, and I'm really curious about this, and if you're going to ask me one of these that determines the game, it very well might be this one. What kind of impact does Portland get off the bench? Again, Kansas City does not have the roster Kansas City thought they were going to have at the beginning of this season. And where you're especially going to feel that is the bench. Whereas you look at Portland, and in theory, you have Janine Becky and Crystal Dunn ready to sub in the second half. That is perhaps the single biggest advantage Portland has on paper heading into this game. And it won them their semifinal game. Maybe it's Janine Becky this time. She's someone I'm really looking at as an X factor. The point is, though, the Thorns have got to be able to take advantage of the difference makers they can bring off the bench, no matter who ends up in the starting 11. If Kansas City subs are making more of an impact, I would be really worried if I'm a Portland Thorns fan. From Kansas City's standpoint, right, you're trying to score the first goal. Again, you're trying to keep this close and just give yourself a chance. The good news is you don't have to go to Providence Park, and you're actually much closer geographically to where the final is being played than the Thorns are. So that part of it, you did the difficult stuff in getting through the true road games. But you're playing, the best attack in the league. So if you can't get that first goal, if you can stay within a goal, if you can keep the game 0-0 in the 70th minute, can Portland, or if Kansas City is winning and things aren't going well, can Portland's bench change the game? Because it is sort of that interesting dynamic that, right, typically it's if you can keep it close, you give yourself a shot, which is certainly true. At the same time, if you're looking at, let's say you're talking about subs at the 70th minute, that's 20 minutes of regular time and another half hour of extra time, in theory. That's a long time to hold off if Portland subs are able to make the impact they're capable of. So that is something I'm really, really looking at this game, is substitutions. It's one of the biggest advantages Portland has. It needs to actually come to fruition, though. There's no guarantee that just because you've got more impactful subs, they actually make that impact. But you saw what Crystal Dunn can do in the semifinal. They're a deeper, more talented team. I expect the Thorns to win, but then again, I was convinced OL Reign were going to win this whole thing, so who knows at this point. It's getting harder and harder to write off the current. They are one win away from doing something truly incredible. Should be a great game in Washington, D.C.